Hey guys, welcome to Read Aloud. That is not Shakespeare. You guys are lucky actually this year that we got to do all of the plays. That was super cool. I think unfortunately it was virtual. That's the less cool part. But I do think it's neat that we were able to read all of the Shakespeare plays. And Miss K is quite good. So she sort of, I think, enjoyed doing those, and we thought that we would switch for the end of the year. What I am going to do is read it's sort of a shorter chapter book, and model for you the way that you should be thinking about what you read as you're reading. So of course, we read for pleasure. It's exciting to read a book. We want to know what happens next. We might identify with a character. So you should be enjoying what you're reading, and it should also be something that is at your level, meaning not too easy and not too hard to the point where you read a chapter and you don't really understand what's going on. If that's happening to you, probably the book is too hard and we should sort of find a different one, or you're just not giving it attention. So you're just sort of looking at the words, you're reading them, but you're not really understanding and taking in the story. That's not really reading. And that's not the point. So I'm going to kind of model for you what your brain should be doing as you read a story. This story is called Rickshaw Girl by Mitali, Perkins, and illustrated by Jamie Hogan. So you guys know that a lot of the books we read as Read Aloud don't always have illustrations. This one will have a few, and I will happily show you them. And you might be familiar with what a rickshaw is, based on perhaps you've studied Asia. I'm not sure where you guys are in your continent studies, but this right here is a rickshaw, and we'll be exploring it more in detail as we read. But looking at the cover, you might get an idea of some things about the book, right? So Rickshaw Girl gives you an idea the protagonist is likely female. And a lot of times, whatever is featured on the cover is significant in the story in some way. So this thing that she's drawing might be significant. Perhaps her gender identity as a girl, maybe that's significant. And then looking at sort of the rickshaw in the background, that's going to have something to do with it. So all of those things you can get from the cover. Even though you should not judge a book by its cover, you can get ideas about what's going to be going on in the story. So Rickshaw Girl. Right away, there's an illustration. So we sort of get a sense of the setting here. See, even just from pictures, you can see that it looks like she's washing clothes, right? So trying to figure out, where does she live? What is it like? Clearly it's not a super urban place. It looks more rural. We'll see if that ends up being the setting. Naima raced through her morning chores, trying hard to be careful. She washed the laundry in the river, making sure she didn't break any buttons this time. The other girls lazily sloshed clothes around, giggling and gossiping. But today, Naima didn't stop to chat. She pumped 4 pails of water at the well, just as Mother had asked, and hauled them back one by one. She sliced eggplant, chili peppers, and onions in tiny, even cubes, the way Mother liked them, instead of chopping them quickly into thick chunks, the way she usually did. So, right away there, we're getting, a sense of what Naima is like, right? A lot of times an author won't have to say, Naima is this. The author will show through the words and the actions of the character some traits about the character. So she is taking the time to chop the onions into tiny pieces, the way her mom likes. That might show she's thoughtful. And she has a lot of chores, right? So chopping onions, she's thoughtful in the way she does it. She has a lot of chores. So she could just be a helpful girl, right? But it could be that maybe something's going on in her family. where she has to do more helping. No, you guys can't totally see. There we go. Where she has to do more helping. We don't really know yet. It's literally the first page, but we already are sort of getting to know things about her. Another thing you might do, so this is about Naima, when you're reading, is there is sometimes what's called a text to self-connection. Now, these for me are honestly probably the most fun, because you're sort of, and you don't always identify with the protagonist in every way, of course not, but maybe in some ways, or maybe you don't identify with the protagonist, but with another character. So a text to self-connection is sort of thinking how you are like that character. And then there is a text to world connection, meaning how could we connect this to something that's going on in the world? And then a text to text connection. So maybe Naima reminds you of Karana in Island of the Blue Elephants for some reason. Now, she hasn't yet so far, but I would just, as you're reading, you might discover that she reminds you of another character or a situation is similar, something like that. So, actually, I am already making a text to self-correction because when I chop onions, I do tend to make them in big chunks because it takes longer to do little chunks, and I am often in a hurry when I cook. So, yes, I made a text to self-connection with this story already. So she sliced eggplant, chili peppers, and onions. And so we're kind of maybe getting an idea of where culture based on food, right? And in our next sentence, we're going to find out more. So culture based on food. I've already wiped 4 banana leaf plates, Naima announced. Without tearing them, Mother asked, her eyebrows rising like crow wings. Not a rip in sight. So again, she's very careful. Mother smiled. Well done, Naima. You may wait outside for Father. Naima went quickly to the flat, wide stone just outside the doorway of their hut. Most of the homes in the village looked the same, with smooth clay walls, thatched roofs, dirt paths, and large stone thresholds. They only looked different on holidays, when girls decorated their families' paths and thresholds with painted patterns called alpanas, just as their ancestors had done for generations. In Naima's village, on International Mother Language Day, when the whole country celebrated the beauty of their Bangla language, the leaders gave a prize to the girl who painted the best alpanas. So now, you guys know what this is called. And if I were a better artist, I could draw you a picture of her house. So now we definitely know she's not living in an urban place. Remember, urban means city. She lives in a rural sort of area. They call it a village. And clay walls and thatched roofs. Thatched probably means it's made from like a grassy sort of material that would be interwoven. And perhaps the illustrator will give us a picture of that later. Humming under her breath, Naima carefully mixed up a batch of rice powder paint. She'd invented a new pattern of curves, lines, and squares in her mind while doing her chores. I have another text to self-connection. You guys might too. Sometimes when I'm doing things I don't like to do, like exercise, I'm thinking of cool ideas for school. That's multitasking. You're keeping your brain interested while you're doing something you maybe don't want to do, like laundry. Before she started painting, she had to wipe off her last practice design. Stop and think before you act, Mother often reminded her. But she never needed to warn Naima to be thoughtful when it came to painting alpanas. And here is a picture of her. Naima's sister, Rashida, came home from school. She started combing out her rag doll's hair and watched Naima erase the stone. You're going to win again this year, sister, she said. I hope so, Naima said. We need another box of paints. And a new pad of paper, Rashida added. So, now we've got Rashida. And you might be guessing, Rashida, I would guess, is probably younger. She's sort of watching, looking up to her sister. But Naima says we need paints. So she clearly is sharing and caring about her sister too. Naima had made the prize last for months. She'd mixed colors from the paint box to create new ones. She and Rashida had discussed how to use each precious piece of fresh paper. Should Naima paint a crocodile slinking through lily pads? Or a monkey clutching a coconut as it swung from branch to branch? And if you are doing a reading journal, you could even draw one of those things that she's talked about. I promise you, sometimes I will draw. This first time I'm not going to, but if we asked you to keep a reading journal, or if you wanted to keep a reading journal, sometimes it is fun to sort of draw what you imagine the scene to be, or draw like what she would draw. So yes. They picked the best paintings to brighten the dark clay walls inside their one-room hut. So now we know there aren't multiple rooms in the place where they live. So imagine your house and everyone just lived in your living room. That's sort of what it would be like. The ring of a rickshaw bell made Naima look up. Salim, their next-door neighbor, was pulling a passenger in his father's rickshaw. Naima watched his skinny legs turn the pedals as he puffed up the hill. The cycle was attached to a brightly painted tin cart with a leather bench and a decorated canopy that shaded customers from the sun. "Why don't you and Salim play together anymore, sister?" Rashida asked. Naima dabbed her brush into the paint. She started a border of small circles that would go all the way around the big stone rectangle. "When you get older, Mother and the aunts will tell you not to talk to boys too. They say it's not proper." "I like playing with everybody at school," Rashida said. "Girls and boys." "I'm with Rashida." "You'll probably stop going soon anyway," Naima thought. Only Salim knew how much she'd wanted to keep going to school. But Naima knew her parents couldn't afford to pay fees for 2 girls. Naima had studied for 3 years. Now it was Rashida's turn. "You'll have to do more chores when you're 10, she said, sighing. "Salim and I are both too busy to play these days." So now we know how old Naima is. She's 10. Still not sure about Rashida, but she's definitely younger. And now we know that Naima is not getting to go to school anymore. So that reminds me of Malala. You guys might have heard about Malala. And she was a girl who was fighting for education for all women. I Am Malala is a good, actually maybe we'll read it. Anyway, that would be a text connection. Naima didn't tell her sister about the signal she and Salim used when they wanted to meet. Salim tucked a white handkerchief into his pocket. Naima tied a white bow on her braid. Once they'd finished their chores and eaten lunch in their own homes, they'd slip away to talk or play cards together behind the leafy banana trees. These days, they only risked the signal for important meetings. That might remind you of a secret code you've had with a friend. "You are getting old, sister," Rashida said. "You probably won't be able to wear a salwar kameez much longer." Both sisters were dressed in cotton pants under long-sleeved tunics that came to their knees. Naima made a face. "I know," she said, "and I can't move fast in a sari. Yards and yards of cloth that you have to wrap around yourself. They look pretty, but I feel as if I'm wearing a big bandage." "Mother moves fast in her sari," Rashida said. Naima knew her sister was trying to comfort her. "I suppose I will too, once I get used to wearing one every day." "I think it's I'm sorry, you guys. "I think it's hard to grow up," Rashida said, holding her ragdoll close. Naima didn't answer, but sometimes she felt the same way. And I think I showed you one picture, and here's another picture, and that is the end of a chapter. So salwar kameez, maybe I will look up and show you guys a picture of what that looks like. But from this picture, it seems like just kind of a type of a long sleeve tunic, so almost just like a longer shirt, but then she gets to wear pants with it. A sari, on the other hand, is like, it really is a long garment that you have to wrap around your body in a certain way, and is like a dress in some ways, but it does take a long time to sort of put on, and it takes some getting used to. So it must be that once the girls get to a certain age, they need to start wearing a sari. So perhaps there will be more about that later. And now we are on chapter 2, and I'm just going to keep reading for a couple of pages, maybe till the next picture. Father was coming downhill. The wheels of his rickshaw stirred up a flurry of dust. He raised a hand to greet the men who were playing cards in the shade of a mango tree. Their rickshaws all waited idly in the lane, and Father had to steer through a tangle of tin and tires. Tangle of tin and tires. There's some alliteration. You might write that in your reading journal. He parked in front of the hut. Naima looked up from her alpanas to admire Father's gleaming new rickshaw. The tassels dangling from the handlebars were still swaying. The side panels were adorned with painted peacock feathers, green and gold and purple, the same color as the tassels. The bright blue of the lake that was painted on the rear panel matched the blue leather seat. White lotus flowers floated on the lake. That would be a cool thing to draw. It was Rashida's turn to greet Father with a pail of river water. Father washed his face and hands and gave her a kiss. The marigolds need water, too, little one. They look as thirsty as I am. Rashida headed for the small patch of flowers behind the hut. She leaned away from the heavy pail to keep her balance. Naima was glad she'd pumped plenty of fresh drinking water from the well. Father could drink as much as he wanted inside the hut. He'd been out since dawn, hauling people and packages from place to place. Right after lunch, he would head out again until midnight. She wished he could rest inside the cool clay hut. He needed to stay out of the hot sun like everybody else, but they had borrowed a lot of money to buy the rickshaw. If they didn't pay it back soon, they might lose the rickshaw. And then, how would Father earn money? Your alpanas get better every day, daughter, Father said, studying the design she was creating on the threshold. This one is not even halfway done yet, Naima answered. I've only just started. Really? It looks so good already. I'm going to paint a star in the middle, Naima told him. Here is a picture of the rickshaw that they were describing. Father stepped over the threshold. He turned to take one last look at the rickshaw before going inside. Will you clean it for me, Naima? He asked. Nobody gets it as bright as you do. Of course, Father, Naima said. The unfinished alpana on the stone called out to her, but she jumped up and found a wet rag. So that's actually going back to her chores, right? So, clean rickshaw. She seems very willing to help. Even though she rushed through her other chores, Naima took her time cleaning Father's rickshaw. Rich people sometimes paid extra money to ride in a clean rickshaw. After scrubbing away most of the grime, she put the rag over one finger, held it in place with the other hand, and traced the outlines of the paintings. She polished the lotus flowers until they gleamed like ivory. The blue tin lake sparkled in the midday sunshine. Father's rickshaw was so new that these decorations were the original ones. Each time Naima cleaned the rickshaw, she imagined scenes the rickshaw painter might invent once these panels faded. Maybe a waterfall cascading down the snowy Himalayan mountains, or a tiger, eyes blazing, peering through a leafy jungle. More ideas of things you could draw. So, we are going to pause there. That seems like a good stopping point. And we'll read more tomorrow. All right, you guys.